Good evening, just gone 7pm, last show of the week. It's Friday, the 26th of February, 2021. Last show of February, actually. My name's Toby Mesme, and this is indeed MesmePolitics. Pardon me, just had to clear my throat there. Welcome along, all the latest on the way. Coming up, Labour embraces the nuclear holocaust. Joe Biden's skewed priorities as China eradicates poverty, the US drops bombs on Syria. But first, Topsy-Turvy politics. The political spectrum is all wonky in Britain. What's going on? We discuss with our political correspondent, now on a permanent basis, Theo Bird. And that is on the way momentarily. This is, for the next half hour, all the latest in UK and US politics from a unique, independent and free leftist perspective. You can get in touch in the chat at any point, and please do. Now, we talk about the fact, we have a Conservative Party advocating raising taxes on the wealthy. We have a Labour Party opposing it. What the hell's going on? Let's talk about it. Joining me to talk about this torrid and bizarre state of affairs is our political correspondent, Theo Bird. Hello, Theo.
Hello, Toby.
So, right now, we have the Labour left and a Tory government sounding progressive on taxation. That's a Tory government that was called, the most right-wing government we've ever had at one point. And then we have the Labour Party under Keir Starmer who won the leadership, promising to maintain Labour's principles on high taxes on the wealthy, arguing against progressive taxation and uniting with a right-wing faction of the Tory party and against public opinion on this. Is this unprecedented in political history in Britain?
From what we've seen, it is unprecedented to see positions on a kind of very standard issue. I mean, taxation, a very standard issue, you can kind of gauge where sectors of the political spectrum lay on it, kind of be shaken up this much. I think this is unprecedented. You never hear about this in, history books. The 1940s Labour government suddenly opposing, taxes on aristocracy, and the Tory government, pushing for that. That is unprecedented, something like that.
I would agree with that, and I think there were obviously eras in political history where the Tory party was about tax and spend, and it did embrace sort of social democracy. But it was never to the left of Labour. It was always to the right. Even if it was only a bit to the right, it was always to the right. We've never seen them to the left of the Labour Party on economics. The question is, who will this help? My reading is it will hurt Keir Starmer, as he won't bring anyone in, and it will alienate his core base, while simultaneously making the Tories look pragmatic and bringing in even more voters to the fold. Do you agree with that? Who will this help?
It won't help here, Keir Starmer, you're right. And apparently a good 60-70% of the electorate support it. So it will help the Tories and the Labour left, and it won't help Keir Starmer. To be honest, I wouldn't see this. I wouldn't, be so quick to see this as the Tories jumping to the left. I would possibly see it as them trying to pay for their COVID regulations and their COVID policies straight up. And possibly Labour having a conflict about that for political reasons. But that's just a theory.
Yes, no, I can see where that comes from. Do you think it's an implicit rejection of the idea of austerity by the Johnson government if they're saying we're going to raise taxes rather than we're going to cut spending?
I don't think the Johnson government ever embraced austerity. In fact, I think they kind of tried to reject it. And the whole idea of austerity, was to keep the debt down and keep the deficit down after the 2008 crisis. This was much bigger than the 2008 crisis. I don't even think they consider austerity an option. I think they're looking for other options, and they're trying to stick to their guns that they've had since before the pandemic, which is, again, a rejection of austerity. This seems like quite an easy way out of it for the Johnson government.
Indeed, because you've got public opinion. The only problem is you don't have the sort of Tory think tanks on your side necessarily. Will backbench Tories, die-in-the-wool ideological Tories push back on this, or are they willing to be pragmatic and swallow it in order to keep themselves in government?
I think there's a lot of backbench Tories likely to reject this. I spoke the other day on the show about the kind of clique of kind of libertarian Tories who look only one way on COVID regulations, and that's out of lockdown. And I don't see why they'd stray from that kind of, hardcore position on taxation. In fact, taxation's even less related to the pandemic. If they're going to oppose regulations, in the name of if they're going to oppose COVID restrictions in the name of a certain principle, then surely they'd, stick to their guns here as well on taxation, which is a, much more core right-wing issue than, health regulations.
Do you think things will normalise over the course of this parliament, or are we seeing a permanent sea change where the Tories are embracing Keynesianism and at the same time the Labour Party is trying to make itself some sort of bulwark of fiscal prudence?
This would be very, very bizarre if it did continue, and I think kind of occurrences like these will subside, with COVID's influence on politics as that subsides, which isn't coming anytime soon. This government has a lot to answer for, including its, mishandling of the pandemic last year and the massive amount of debt it racked up, and now having to answer for that fiscally. So again, it would be very, very strange, even more strange than this in itself, if this became the norm. I highly doubt it.
Are we thinking it might be over the course of years that this normalises rather than months? As in, as we head out of the COVID era, maybe things go back to normal. But for now, the Tories are going to be about spending and about things that haven't traditionally been their comfort zone.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, unprecedented pandemic, unprecedented political changes in the Tory party, and unprecedented kind of soul-searching within the Labour Party. So yes, I think this sort of thing will subside with the pandemic. But at the moment, I don't think the leadership of the Tory party, whatever the backbenchers say, will be, crazy about sticking to their core principles when they've got so much to answer for in the last year.
And final question, just it's entirely up for grabs, but through your political instincts, do you feel, because it was pretty much accepted that Keir Starmer going into the 2024 election would be very much to the left of New Labour, even if he was to the right of Jeremy Corbyn. Now we're seeing things like this. Do you still think Keir Starmer's manifesto will be to the left of Tony Blair's? Or do you think he's now trying to align himself with that sort of brand of politics?
I think he might be wanting to align himself with the stable brand of politics. But again, I think this is a total anomaly, and I wouldn't take it so much as an indicator of what the next election will look like. I think that's quite a risky thing to do. And as we've said before, this is very unprecedented, very strange. And I wouldn't be so quick to, say that this indicates Keir Starmer's position in the next election. However, aside from that, I would say that he would possibly be, wanting to go for a Blairite stability image, even though he's gone for a totally different position on fiscal policy at this current moment as Blair ever did.
Indeed, with Blair famously talking up things like a windfall tax when he came to power. So, Theo Bird, our political correspondent, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me again.
And we will hear from Theo Bird, our political correspondent, once again on the show next week. Now, in terms of quite like the new name we've got for it, Topsy Turvy politics, very much what we're living through. Labour is still trying to reckon with a huge tectonic sea change that they weren't prepared for. Keir Starmer's big speech the other week demonstrated they weren't prepared for this. They're having to reckon with a massive shift in economic policy that makes their protestations that the Tories are going to be the party of slash and burn appear ludicrous and make Sunak look even more generous. Labour have as good as lost the post-COVID battles. Thus, immediately we see a turnaround. Immediately we see bold, ambitious ideas. Really eye-catching things, not just the recovery bond idea, which was an absolute damp squib, and my instincts told me that at the time, but I hoped against hope, maybe there would be something in there. But of course, no one cares about recovery bonds. Put that in the mix. But that's not your flagship policy, and if it is, you're not a good politician. They've as good as lost the upcoming battle because they're not going to change direction anytime soon. They still have no convictions. Will the Tories shut up regarding their ideological objections to these sort of policies? I think they probably will. They seem to have done. They're being much more vocal about lockdowns than about taxation. They seem to genuinely be embracing a more pragmatic posturing, which is bizarre. It's not what you'd expect, but it is what they're doing. Over in the United States, the US has conducted airstrikes in Syria against a militia group, President Biden ordering airstrikes. They call it an Iranian-backed militia group in eastern Syria, after the group fired rockets at US troops. That's how NBC is putting it. The translation, this is put by at Z_squirrel, is a really good, I know it's a bizarre at, but a really good progressive commentator on foreign policy on Twitter says, translation, the imperialist US occupation force attacked local resistance fighters to continue its illegal presence in Syria. The FRSO, Revolution Socialism Liberation, Freedom Road Socialism Organisation, says it condemns in the strongest possible terms the February 25th attack launched by the Biden administration in Syria. There is nothing that can justify this cowardly move, and it will be opposed by all who stand for peace and justice. President Biden has been telling the world America is back. We now see exactly what he means. The empire of the dollar wants to control the land, labour and resources of others, and is more than willing to use military means to do so. The cold reality is that the US is the aggressor in the Middle East, and Washington is trampling on the right of people of the region to determine their own destiny. Iran, Syria, the Palestinian resistance, and the progressive forces of Yemen, Iraq and Lebanon have built a powerful camp of resistance to imperialism and its Israeli allies. This move by the Biden administration indicates a sharpening of the contradictions and more conflict in the not-so-distant future. The people and government of Syria have a proud history of standing up against imperialism and Zionism. Western imperialism, with the help of the Israeli government, did everything in their power to destroy the country. Syria beat them, and it seems that the Biden administration has a problem with that. In the months ahead, progressive and anti-war forces have our work cut out for us. The US needs to get all troops out of the Middle East, every last one of them. Sanctions on Iran and Syria should be dropped. The US needs to stop calling those who fight for freedom in Palestine, Iraq, Yemen and other countries terrorists. End the attacks on Syria, US out of Middle East, end the sanctions on Iran and Syria. That is from the Freedom Road Socialist Organisation. Basically, all I have to say on the matter is, every US president has been the war criminal in chief, and we're framed these things in the West in a really biased way, a complete propagandized way. People who aren't terrorists are called terrorists, and people who are terrorists aren't called terrorists. So today, this is from Anna Kasparian on Twitter. Today, Biden approved an airstrike in Syria, and the Senate parliamentarian shot down federal minimum wage hike through reconciliation. Dems can overrule her, but Biden doesn't want to. Dems will lose everything in the midterms and possibly the next general, and they'll deserve it. And if you want to have a listen here, this is again from Z Squirrel. Try doing Chomsky's thought exercise and reverse the roles. What if Syrian forces occupied parts of the US, then some local patriotic resistance fighters took one of them down, and in response Syria bombed them? How would the New York Times render that? Have a listen to Noam Chomsky.
Everyone's worried about stopping terrorism. Well, it's a really easy way. Stop participating in it. If you take a poll among U.S. intellectuals, support for bombing Afghanistan is just overwhelming. How many of them think that you should bomb Washington because of the U.S. war against Nicaragua, let's say, or Cuba, or Turkey, or anyone else? If anyone were to suggest this, they'd be considered insane. But why? I mean, if one is right, why is the other wrong? When you try to get someone to talk about this question, they just will try. They can't comprehend what your question is, because you cannot comprehend that we should apply to ourselves the standards you apply to others. That is incomprehensible. Now, there couldn't be a moral principle more elementary. I mean, All you have to do is read George Bush's favorite philosopher. There's a definition, famous definition in the Gospels of the hypocrite. The hypocrite is the person who refuses to apply to himself the standards he applies to others. By that standard, the entire commentary and discussion of the war, so-called war on terror, is pure hypocrisy, virtually without exception. Can anybody understand that? No, can't understand it. But that's not so unusual. I mean, I'll bet you anything that if you go back to Japan in the 1930s or 40s and you did a poll of intellectuals on the war, you'd probably get the same reactions. I mean, I know it was true in Germany and France and everywhere else. It's just standard. It's ugly, but it's standard.
Make no mistake, this is hypocritical brutality from the US, solidarity with Syria, its people and its government. Whatever the views or differences I personally have with that government and with that nation are completely irrelevant when it comes to this issue. I know where the solidarity needs to lie. Solidarity with Syria, solidarity with the Syrian people, with the Syrian government, whose sovereignty has been breached by this. Shame on the United States. Strongest possible condemnation to and on the United States. And this helps no one. This aids no one. This is a continuation of utter, inhumane, psychotic levels of brutality. And it needs to stop. It needs to stop. Now, onto not much worse, it's nothing compared, but onto, again, bad. A ruling in the Senate yesterday dealt a severe blow to Democrats' hopes of raising the minimum wage in the COVID-19 relief package, probably dooming the proposal in the legislation that is headed for a vote in Congress. The parliamentarian, the in-house referee, ruled that the provision was not compliant with rules governing the budget process that Congress is using to pass the bill with simple majorities. We are deeply disappointed in this decision, said Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, saying we are not going to give up the fight to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour to help millions of struggling American workers and their families. The American people deserve it, and we are committed to making it a reality. And here's a quick report from CNBC television on the matter.
There's breaking news now on CNBC, and this just into our newsroom. The Senate parliamentarian has ruled that the $15 minimum wage hike that's been proposed, that the president had promised, cannot be included in the president's coronavirus relief package. House Democrats preparing to advance the $1.9 trillion relief bill sometime tomorrow. The question had been, would it be proper and appropriate? In fact, would it be sort of within the rules to include this in the relief package for COVID, the disaster relief money for millions and millions of people across the land? That decision came to the parliamentarian in the United States Senate. We had expected a ruling late yesterday or sometime this afternoon. Moments ago, during the commercial break, it came. The $15 an hour minimum wage promise cannot go into the COVID relief package. There will be more news on this, no doubt.
So this is what they always wanted. Biden was saying this is what would happen behind the scenes for weeks. They're not committed to it. It's elitist, first of all. Parliamentarian is unelected, unaccountable. They've done this. They've walked over the whole process. It's a betrayal of what Democrats campaigned on. And it is a shocking statement of priorities that Biden will fight more for airstrikes in Syria and stepping up aggressions around the world, more than he will fight for a pitiful raise in the minimum wage for American workers. It should really be around $25 an hour now, if we account for inflation and things like that. $15 an hour over 4 or 5 years. It's pittance. It is, to quote Boris Johnson, chicken feed. It is literally chicken feed, and you can't even do that. And people like Mitt Romney are pushing an $11 minimum wage. It is an insult. The political class in America are spitting in the face of ordinary working people. And they're lapping it up. This is why the Democrats lose. Every single darn time. This is why they lose. This is why people hate liberals. This is why they get smashed at elections. This is why people like Trump won in the first place. And this is why, no matter how much we fight as progressives, kids will still be in cages as long as the mainstream Democrats are in power. Trump-like figures will be looming as long as people like the Democrats are in power. And the far right will continue to grow as long as corporate Democrats are in power. It is imperative not only to defeat the Republican Party, but to smash the mainstream Democratic Party and build something new from the ashes, or we are on a one-way course to fascism. Plain and simple. The House has passed the Equality Act, which is good to see. The culture war around it is wholly confected, all polling would indicate. It's astroturfed, it's nonsense, there are vital provisions for LGBTQ equality in the bill, and the culture war over Mr. Potato Head, or Mrs. Potato Head, or they, them Potato Head, no one cares, okay, no one cares. We care about the conditions in those factories, where the toys are made, but other than that, I really don't care what pronouns you give Mr. Potato Head, okay? And no one does. The people who talk about cancel culture are now boycotting toys and going on Fox News squealing about it. Okay, so over here, the apocalypse is on its way. Labour's commitment to maintaining the UK's nuclear weapons is non-negotiable. The party's Shadow Defence Minister John Healey is expected to said in a speech today, supposedly, can't find it anywhere, emphasising a deliberate shift in tone from the Jeremy Corbyn era. In a speech that implicitly acknowledges the perception by some within Labour that Corbyn's public doubts over nuclear weapons and NATO help damage the party's reputation with certain voters, Healey will also stress the party's commitment to the North Atlantic Alliance and to maintaining a viable UK defence industry. While Labour's 2017 and 2019 manifestos both pledged to support the renewal of Trident, the nuclear submarine system, and to back multilateral rather than unilateral nuclear disarmament efforts, these were very obviously compromises accepted by Corbyn. John Healey says, First, Labour's commitment to NATO is unshakable. Labour's commitment to the UK's nuclear deterrent is non-negotiable. Labour's commitment to international law and to the UN, to universal human rights and to multilateral treaties and organisations that uphold them is total. And finally, Labour's determination to see British investment directed first to British industry is fundamental, not just to our thinking on defence, but to the kind of society that we want to build. So, Corbyn was bad on this. His policy on this was bad because he was upholding NATO and Trident. It was a betrayal of principle. I think he should have gone much further. However, Starmer's much worse on this. He's now touting and bragging about being, we're going full Joe Swinson. It is a bit ridiculous. Politicians line up to tell us that they'll press the button. You can trust us to keep you safe by killing you all. No one will be won over with this. The perception on national security, sure, there are certain things you can do on that, but this is not the answer. You help no one with this. There are other ways to achieve a view of credibility about keeping Britain secure. There are other ways to achieve it that don't involve Trident or NATO. We need to leave NATO. It is my unequivocal view, my informed view, that Britain should unilaterally withdraw from NATO and unilaterally scrap Trident. And if we did so, we would be safer and more secure as a country. Trident doesn't defend Britain. It places us that little bit closer to a nuclear apocalypse, nuclear holocaust. At the same time, NATO merely ties us in to the imperialist, brutal exporting of state terrorism, anti-Russia, anti-China, anti-Iran hostilities right around the world. It kills our people. It helps no one. It damages international peace and stability. NATO is something we should, and no progressive person should want anything to do with. We should be out of the European Union, which we are now, thank God. We should be out of NATO, and we should unilaterally disarm. We can have defence, we can defend our country, but only if it's attacked. There is no need for Britain to intervene around the world. There is no scenario that I would countenance such a thing that I can think of right now. Okay, in the current world, you don't come at me with, well, what if Hitler appeared and started massacring people in Europe? Sure, things like that you'd have to look at. But any scenario in the 2020s and 2030s that I can conceive of, there is no need for any British military intervention anywhere. We should stop selling our bombs to the Middle East. We should get a grip and focus on protecting our own people and get the hell out of all these organisations. Build solidarity around the world. Be internationalists. But not interventionists. There is a difference. This isn't isolationism. This is anti-interventionism. Internationalism is a core principle. We should be an internationalist country. But as equals, not imperialist aggressors. You win no one over with this. As I say, what we've heard today, we heard talk of stepping up from Labour, boat patrols around Russia. It's a full embrace of the horrors and hostilities of established wisdom on Western foreign policy. It's something none of us want to see, and it should get in the bin. Meanwhile, Tony Blair, and voters don't want us to be in NATO. It's an elitist... Again, you know, it's just as the EU is a bankers' club, NATO is a warmongers' club. People don't want wars. Tony Blair has urged Keir Starmer's critics to cut him some slack and backed his stance on business taxes after backlash over comments from Starmer that appeared to suggest Labour was against taxing corporations to pay for the pandemic. Well, Mr. Blair, first and foremost, as Momentum said in their statement, thanks for thinking of us, Tony, but we don't take advice from politicians who spent $8.4 billion in our money, on an illegal invasion that killed hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians. You absolute cretinous piece of scum. Tony Blair deserves no space in any room. And any time anyone quotes him, oh, he won elections, oh, he did this, right? You are legitimising the murder of hundreds of thousands of people. And the reason you don't care, the reason you don't hold it to the same standards as if he did it to Hungary or Poland or Germany, is because those people have darker skin than you. That's the truth. Because if they were white, you'd care. That's the absolute truth. It's the only possible explanation. It's how these people get away with their forever wars. Tony Blair should be pulled up at The Hague. He should have been court-martialed. In previous times he would have been shot. I wouldn't advocate that now, but in previous times he would have been shot, right? For war crimes. In my view, he should be imprisoned, right? He should be in jail, serving out time for war crimes. Obviously don't want to condone violence in any way, as I say, but he should be in jail for war crimes. That's what he's done. The crimes he's committed. Abhorrent. And finally, it's really welcome to see the R rate has gone up. We'll end on not the R rate, what am I on about? The alert level has gone down from 5 to 4. We're still in trouble, it's gone down a bit. Jonathan Van Tam says we must maintain discipline.
My inbox in the last week has been besieged with people writing in saying, I've had the vaccine, essentially, can I now start to break the rules? Can I go and see my grandchildren? Can I do X, Y, and Z? And the answer to that is no.
You heard him. Always good to have a bit of Van Tam at the end of the week. That's it from me. Subscribe, like the video, turn notifications on, and MesmePolitics will be back Monday from 7 p.m. Have a nice weekend. That's it, a busy week down, and next week, indeed, it is the budget. And we barrel towards Joe Biden's first ever State of the Union. It was unclear when it was going to be, but it's on its way at some point, in some way, it's unclear. Because they're still passing that relief package that the minimum wage is no longer in. So to conclude, out with imperialism, out with the European Union, out with NATO, have a lovely weekend, and scrap Trident.